So we continue the conversation, and as we're taking that break to the news, Governor Nanok, you wanted to come in hot and hard. I hope the fire has not dissipated.
Thank you. I think I wanted to come to respond to three things which my colleague Nderito has spoken on behalf of Azimio. I think the first one is that he brought in an example of what he's doing in Laikipia with a fund that is supposed to support small businesses. One of the challenges that Kenyan businesses are facing, small micro businesses are facing, is the cost of credit. It's very high. And the fact that they do not have they cannot be able to meet the requirements of banking institutions, then it exposes them to other creditors, exposes them to Shylocks, and exposes them to those who are loaning, like Puliza, whose interest is very high. Because when you talk about 10% interest in a day, then in an year, if you have been borrowing, it's very high. It's almost 3,650%. And one of the things that we are promising, the William Ruto is promising, is to address this cost of credit and make sure that everybody, including the small businesses, access credit at a much equitable rate. The second issue is about the constitution. You know, if you want a leader who is serious, who is honest, is the one who believes in the rule of law and who accepts when they know they are wrong. William Ruto opposed the constitution, but once the people of Kenya accepted that this is a document that is going to be there, he embraced it. In fact, he ran in a contested election along with a president, and they won the first election, they won the second one, and he is ready to defend that constitution to the letter. And I think that is honesty. And I think honesty is not when honesty is not when you want to go against the implementation of that constitution by swearing yourself in. You know, if you go out and swear yourself in against the very constitution you supported, then that's dishonesty. That's what we should be looking for, irrespective. Who is this leader who stands for what he says and does it in public and not behind the scenes? And I think it is critical that we move forward on that particular one. And I gave it to William Ruto for speaking his mind and for standing with the constitution anytime. And he has even come out and said the results of the August 9th elections, he is ready to accept those results, whatever direction it goes. And I think that is being honest, because you're putting it out in the public. And it's not an if, because we've heard from Azimio, if. You know, if is a dangerous, very dangerous word, because it may take us down those roads when we were not accepting the result of the Constitution. Even when the court itself, the Supreme Court, says the numbers were not a problem, it is just a process of counting, of arriving at those numbers that was a problem in the last election when a dispute came into court. But even when the highest court in the land put a ruling that Uhuru Kenyatta and William Samoei Ruto were duly elected, we have a candidate in Azimio who still opposed that ruling and led a boycott, an economic boycott. Because how do we accept a candidate who did a economic boycott of the very industry he is claiming he wants to revive and to support? Who can trust that candidate, that Azimio candidate, if he led that boycott of goods, of dairy products, of various productions? How do we trust him now that he is in the best safe hands to revive that industry?
Well, promises. The SMEs in Laikipia are accessing an economic stimulus fund right now, valued at 3.3 billion at 7.5%. 7.5% per year. So the SME in Laikipia,
with security or without security?
Perhaps you want to tell my story, Nanok. I mean, because I'm giving you opportunity to...
It's a good clarification, with security or without.
No, but the point is this.
Or you're going to lead up to it. You're
No,
going to
I'll
give us the
explain. I'll
details.
explain my economic stimulus. But what happens is that, you see, when an opponent knows their ideas are lacking a little, then what they do is interrupt the other person, which is obviously not very useful. It is not very useful, Muga. You are accessing credit without security up to 500,000 bob, with security for the rest of it. But up to 500,000 job without security, because the county government is providing a guarantee. And that is today, not tomorrow promise. The same program we are running in Nakuru, because you asked me earlier, if you are in government, why don't you implement? And I am giving you the examples. Those of us in Azimio who are running governments, because you see, as a county governor, I'm running a government.
Yes,
The things I'm telling you we will do on a national scale, we are already doing them in the spaces where we are running government, such as Laikipia. So our cost of credit is 7.5% for 3 years, for 4 years. This is asset finance, this is LPO financing, this is invoice discounting, this is working capital finance. Today, we want to scale that up nationally, and this is what our colleagues frankly have been unable to tell you with clarity what it is that it will do. Constitution of Kenya 2010.
Yes.
Constitution of Kenya 2010. You asked the question, Muga, earlier, isn't 9 years enough period of time? And what would be an enough period of time to be able to make up our minds if there is anything that needs improvements? In my view, those 9 years have given us an opportunity to see what is working and what could be made to work better. All these promises we are making, you are right in your questioning us that why are you not then using the existing structures like devolution? That is why Azimio has already said publicly to 35%, not 15%, 35% of nationally raised revenues must go to counties. Azimio, Eric was challenging, if you have partners in government, do these things now. That is why BBI was on the table, because of trying to do the things now. Okay, we were not successful because the matter then ended up in court. But in all 44 county assemblies, the BBI had been passed in the National Assembly and in the Senate, demonstrating clearly that it has quite a bit of popular appeal. Aspirant William Ruto had an opportunity just the other day when we were negotiating resources to counties for this year, which is called Division of Revenue. Counties were, we as Council of Governors were pushing for an increment in the current 370 billion that is going. And he said it is not possible, and it is a very big fat no, you cannot increase resources to devolution. That is just 2-3 months ago at the IBEC. Okay, so when he does promise that he is going to increase resources to devolution, please forgive me for doubting him, because he's just had an opportunity and he has turned out that opportunity to do so in his budget. Are we ready to accept results or not? Okay, let me just say here for the record, as Azimio, and not just for the presidency, across various seats, we are ready. And you can believe our democratic credentials for the following reason. Our aspirant spent 8.5 years in detention fighting for political pluralism in this country. 8.5 years. I wonder what his competitor can say about that. This aspirant, the Azimio aspirant, has demonstrated throughout the 90s willingness to be a pragmatic political leader to move the country forward. I wonder what his competitor would say. Azimio aspirant has stepped forward time and time again. If you think about in 1998, doing a coalition, in fact, with KANU in order to move the country forward. In 2002, the NARC movement, where this aspirant stood up and said, look, let us rally behind Mwai Kibaki as the president. So this is a candidate who has demonstrated time and time again. When we were all in government in Kibaki 2, this is the aspirant who was consistent in chairing the National Economic and Social Council, yeah, and in driving the economic agenda that Kibaki administration is when he was serving as Prime Minister. So this is an aspirant who has demonstrated time and time again. To the question of economic boycott and political contestation, I mean, even we here sitting here, Nanok and I, we've already told you we are frenemies. We are friends, first and foremost, but we are on completely opposite sides of this political competition. So we must do political battle in every corner of Kenya, Nanok and I, yeah, as we sell our respective positions. You also can see, for the most part, they are actually the ones copying, because when you press them for actual detail of policy, or for example, where they have done anything, they are unable to do it. As I yield the floor to him, they are the ones in government. Okay? William Ruto is a deputy president of Kenya today, and he has been for the last 9 years. Yeah? Raila Odinga is a leader of opposition, and he has been for the last 9 years. So this attempt by Nanok's side to try and paint as though it was Raila who should have been achieving these policy outcomes is completely false. And it is this kind of false narrative that our colleagues are driving in the countryside. They are the ones in government. In my view, they have done such a poor job, even their boss has walked away from them to say, look, these guys cannot be trusted in government in the future.
Governor Nanok, even as you come in to respond to some of those things, oftentimes history is the best teacher for people then who will go on to a new subject and they'll say, all right, this is what we have been taught before, and upon this we can go forward, right? Now, people will hold on to certain things that they've been told that has rung in their ears for the longest time. And on the government in which Deputy President William Ruto still sits today, there were promises that were made that still ring very loudly in the ears of Kenyans. And unfortunately, those will be used to judge you in the future, right? One of them that stands out to very many people is that we will complete stadia across the country. You know, I believe the time frame on several occasions that was given was 6 months. Till today, those things have not been done. I think of an education that was ripped apart because of COVID, right? And it would have required very many students to learn from home. This was not done. Another promise then that was given was that children would be given laptops upon which they would be able to learn, right? And I can see a situation whereby if that promise had been kept, this COVID thing that destabilized education, right? If that promise had been kept, that gap would have been filled. Those are just two examples of promises that were made and not kept, right? And here we have another raft of promises being made. How then do we want Kenyans to say, actually, you know what, this time we can believe you?
Thank you. And I think, let me begin with that. You know, the Uhuru Ruto government was a team. And those promises were made on behalf of Jubilee administration. But now when it comes to implementation, it is about the team that is implementing those promises. You have the cabinet, you have the ministries, you have the various other players, and a decision-making organ once you are done with campaigning and you're executing. And I said that a lot was achieved during the first term. Of
the promises made?
Of the promises made.
Some
others that were not made because I'm telling you it is a team. And the leader of the government team is always a president because that is his government, with the support of a deputy. Even in the second term, with the promises were being made, you cannot blame the deputy because he is not the one running government. He is the one allocated duties to do, to be able to execute some of those promises. Those promises were being implemented by the various relevant ministries and institutions. So if there was a failure in that, then you hold accountable to the person that was elected president. What William Ruto is doing now is promises that we himself will be held accountable once he becomes the president and he'll be directing the implementation of those promises.
But when these promises were being made, and I have to stick on this, when those promises were being made, he didn't say these promises will be implemented by the president and I will follow suit to assist. He said we.
He made commitments.
Said we.
Yeah.
And at that point, he must have known what you're saying now, that the runners of this engine was not him. There were people, there were CSs, there were PSs, there were policymakers. He must have known this. Would it have been so bad? If we're now saying we're being honest, would it have been to say, you know what, guys, this is what I would have liked to do, right? But it has not happened because of 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I'm saying this because people are hanging on every word that is being said, and it is very important to be really honest with people right now and say, you know what?
Correct.
We messed up, but here's an opportunity for us to try again. You know, if we seem to be running away from the responsibility and saying, well, you know, it really wasn't me.
If you are part of a team, you agree on the script on what I will say, what the other person will say.
Right.
But all of it is part of that team. But if you do not have the control when it comes to implementation, because decision on implementation is made by the head of that team. And this is basically what happened in the second time. I think you've heard William Ruto coming out publicly and saying he has played a very, very minimal role on the second term implementation of Jubilee's government agenda. And that is a fact. And that is out in the public domain. And it is something that cannot be contested because it is himself who has said, if he had that opportunity, even the big four,
if he was receiving the support of the president to run, would the words be the same?
Yes, it will have been the same.
Would he have come out to say, you know what?
Yes.
The failures of this administration are not mine.
They're not my failures. If he was receiving the support of the president, as he's not now, would he be saying the same thing? Because it seems as though it's a support issue. Now that I'm not in the inner caucus anymore, I'm not going to speak in support of the president.
He has come out publicly to own up the first term of Jubilee administration. But the second term, he has publicly said he is not responsible because he was kept aside.
Now, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He's dropping that responsibility because he was kept aside. If he was receiving the support, would the words have been the same?
It will have been different. Yeah, it will have been different. But let me just continue. It will have been different. If he had received the support and he had played a very big role in implementing, it will have been different.
But why not look at the structure of cabinet for a moment?
Let me just
as you proceed, why don't you look at the structure of cabinet?
Please,
because it's a team. You said it's a team.
Let me conclude. Let me conclude first. Number one, you know, as you implement in Laikipia, a stimulus program to support the small businesses with a 7% interest. We in Turkana are implementing one small amount, 186 million, supporting 3,000 small businesses at 3% interest. And this is because we accepted that the 3,000 small and micro businesses in Turkana do not have the sufficient security to be able to borrow from a financing institution. And government has to provide that security. And this is what we are saying. If William Ruto takes up government, then we will deliberately provide that room to be able to lift up those businesses, because it's in those businesses where revenue generation is going to be increasing, money in the pockets of people is going to be increasing, and then we can be able to solve the 9 trillion debt burden. I think if we do not have a plan for solving the huge debt burden, then this country is going to the dogs. Second is the issue of constitutional changes. In fact, I in particular think 9 years is not sufficient enough for us to be able to change 45% of our constitution. 75 articles in the constitution is what BBI was proposing to change. And those changes were so fundamental that it will have brought us a completely different document. And I think we needed sufficient time to implement it. What have we done? We have not implemented. Even for northern Kenya, for the equalization fund that was supposed to equalize them, up to now, those resources have not been deployed. Even that alone has not been implemented. And our commitment for William Ruto is to make sure that fund is deployed to help those areas.
Governor,
that fund
whose
is
responsibility
deployed.
was it to implement, say, you mentioned, well, the equalization fund, whose responsibility was it?
The executive. Because that fund
The
sits
national government,
in
the
the
national
nation-
executive.
that fund sits in the national treasury.
Okay.
That
why
fund
was-
is supposed to be implemented by the national treasury. It is never been rolled out. I and Governor Nderito are facing the problem of insecurity. And I look at insecurity as not a problem. I look at it as inhibitor of potentiality. Because when you look at why cat rustling and insecurity is on the rise, it's because we are denying to focus on how we can be able to unlock the potential of those people. What are they fighting for? Water and pastures. What are they fighting for? It's the fact that government is not focusing on those areas to solve those critical problems. We, through the bottom up, will want to give people that opportunity through their solutions and put money deliberately.
So let me ask you that question directly, Governor Nanok. Okay, so you tell us that the deputy president was deputy president for the first 5 years. He has been relegated to somebody just like a visitor to the cabinet in the second term. In that first term, why was the constitution only implemented to a tune of what you said, 30%? When the government was working properly and there was proper coordination and understanding, why was only 30% of the constitution implemented?
I can tell you that there were difficulties because the current administration was not ready to implement that constitution. And it's even deliberately refusing to implement the rulings of the High Court. I think you see impunity in implementation of that constitution.
So Uhuruto administration
resources-
was unwilling to implement the constitution.
Uhuru's administration was unwilling to implement that constitution. It is continuing even in the second term, even with the support
I'm
of Raila
deliberately
Odinga.
saying Uhuruto
Yeah.
because it is Uhuru and Ruto. Even in the first 5 years, it was an Uhuruto administration.
You know, the responsibility
There
of
was a
every
time
government.
and opportunity for the president, the deputy president, and their cabinet to implement this constitution, to operationalize the equalization fund, to operationalize things like the judiciary fund. Why was this not done?
You see, every administration, whether national government or counties, it is the head of that government that is responsible. Who is the head of government national? Head of government and head of state? It's the president. Who is the head of government in the county? It's the governor. So ultimate responsibility falls on that.
What responsibility
yeah.
did the deputy president? Let's
Pardon?
just ask now, because we're saying that the responsibility lays at the feet of the executive, right? Of the president. So, having been elected by the people of Kenya as a pair, what was responsibility of the deputy president through and through? Because it would seem as though now he really didn't have anything to do there. And so the question that would come out from there is, if you had the second highest position in the land and really you said, okay, nothing was done. The question is, how then will you be able to do much more with more responsibility put in your hands?
That answer is in our constitution, because the constitution basically clearly states that the deputy president is the principal assistant to the president, and he is assigned responsibilities to do. He is assigned. Underline that. Even my own deputy governor, I assigned responsibilities. They have no direct constitutional responsibilities to do. He is assigned responsibilities by both the president or any act of parliament.
But there's an act of parliament, Governor Nanok,
Yeah.
that assigns the responsibility directly to the deputy president. The PFM Act.
Yeah.
It establishes the Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council. This, like we're reminded by Governor Murithi, is where you as governors meet with the national government. We meet also with the Commission on Revenue Allocation and others to discuss division of revenue. This would have been an opportune moment to discuss the Equalization Fund. The Deputy President has been the chair of IBEC for 9 years. We don't have the Equalization Fund.
Thank you for bringing that one up. IBEC takes decision on division of revenue. And for you to understand, National Treasury plays a very big role in determining how to distribute revenue, particularly looking at micro and macro issues. They bring in a proposal. The Commission of Revenue Authority brings another proposal. We come and negotiate in the IBEF. And most of the time, from my experience even up to now, National Treasury always takes the last word because they bring in issues of balancing budgets, balancing debt, and many other things. National Treasury. So that sitting of IBEC is always a procedural sitting. And
It's
I
a
think
rubber
there is no
stamping
particular
exercise.
sitting. It's more or less, we are negotiating, but we end up taking the National Treasury position. I can tell you for that. But those decisions are always made in advance. And nothing prevents. Like I can tell you what we've done.
Are you suggesting that the
Let me just mention
meetings
this.
are irrelevant, that the decisions are made and all you are asked to do is to discuss a foregone conclusion?
Yeah, we've been debating and trying to push for resources to be increased, but it's been difficult to shift away from the National Treasury position. I can tell you for a fact. And maybe
it
this is
appears
something that we need to
That
relook
in such
in future.
meetings, the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury is even more powerful than the Deputy President.
The Cabinet Secretary for Treasury has a leverage, and the leverage is because they have stuck on certain positions on the amount of money they want to allocate to counties, and they have never changed it. But you have to accept in the 2022-2023 budget, using members of parliament that are aligned to William Ruto, we have managed to push Azimio to accept to put 35% allocation for devolved governments in the budget. This is not their intention. If you look at the original draft budget they had presented to Parliament, it did not contain 35%. It is still contained 15%. So we've managed to push that, and it is in those budget estimates. And I think this is a commitment to ourselves that you can even do the 35% now. You don't have to wait for a constitutional change to effect 35%. Because the current constitution talks of a minimum 15%. It doesn't talk of maximum.
There's no
Maximum
ceiling.
has to be negotiated. It can go to 50. It can go to 60.
Allow us to take a break so we can take a look at the traffic and weather, and then we come back and Governor Muriithi, you'll respond to some of these issues. 25 minutes to 10. In whose hands are we safe? Is it in the hands of William Samoei Arap Ruto, the Deputy President of the Republic of Kenya, or is it in the hands of Raila Odinga, who is supposed to be the leader of the opposition? But there are those like William Ruto's camp who say he's actually acting as Deputy President. We'll even discuss that kind of confusion that we have as well. Governor Derito Muriithi is the chair of the Raila Odinga presidential campaign, while Governor Josephat Nanok is the chair of is the Director General of the William Ruto presidential campaign.
This is the Situation Room.
As we're taking that break, I think the big issue here that is emerging, City, is just like the South Sudan case. SPLM in opposition, SPLM in government. Is it a Jubilee in opposition and Jubilee in
Actually,
government?
we have invented a system that is actually purely and uniquely Kenyan. It's disingenuous in so many ways. You have a deputy president who we're not really sure is in Jubilee or is in URP because the normal
UDA.
processes, UDA.
UDA.
Yes.
Not URP.
UDA. Forgive me. I'm not very certain where it is that he stands. You have an ODM governor who hasn't left his position as the ODM governor, and yet he's supporting a URP presidency. That's Kenyan. Then you have an independent governor who is in Jubilee and is supporting.
He's in PNU.
He's actually in PNU and he is in Jubilee, and yet he's supporting an
Azimio.
ODM Azimio, and he's supporting. Look at now, you see, you're confusing it even further. And he's supporting an ODM candidate. Now, this is Kenyan, but against his background, it tells you that positively, the spirited manner in which Governor Nanok has actually supported and presented the position of his candidate, it points us, under the manner in which Governor Muriithi has actually supported his candidate, it tells us of how it is Kenyans can discuss pertinent issues by completely avoiding them. You see, here we have a situation in this country where we know the realities, and yet we discuss the things which are the non-essentials and the non-realities and the politicized realities that we like to talk about. The deputy president in this country has been, and by Governor Knox's own admission, a powerful deputy. If you can convince Parliament to change issues, it means you have the power, you have the following. In the first term of this government, this was a genuine nusu mkate government. It's the truth. There were appointments based on sharing that particular political power. It's a fact that we know, but we seem to be skirting around it as though it didn't happen. It did happen. Now, where we are right now and the discussions that we're having, if we allow the political debate to take center stage and we fail to face the realities, then we are going to fail to face the responsibilities that each of these politicians have had. The only person who has actually had no power in this whole situation is the former Prime Minister.
Absolutely.
I disagree.
No power.
Absolutely.
No, in government, what power has he had? He has power as a politician.
Authority or
Fully
power?
disagree.
I am talking about power, not authority, power. He has had power as a opposition politician who has members of parliament and somebody who has had influence because of his history. But you're talking about power within government?
In the
Now,
same way.
I think
let me
it's
just
my
finish here
my
for-
time to respond.
For CT, in the same way you're saying that the deputy president could convince members of parliament to change something in parliament, it's the same way that the leader of opposition and leader of ODM could convince his MPs to change.
Absolutely, but
So
he was
power.
not the deputy president, neither was he in the
Can I
government.
take the first?
The-
the
the-
first
thank you.
Let-
Thank you, Eric. And it is true, our political arrangements are confusing. For example, I'm an independent governor, and I have indicated in the next season or in this coming election, I will run as a member of a political party. We have a certain history in terms of the law about coalition political parties. And some amendments were made to the Political Parties Act to give coalition political parties the same rights so that they're able to field candidates and so on, which is expected to be an improvement. But I want to go back then to this question. What is the role of the Deputy President in the management of the affairs of Kenya? I think it would be really incorrect let me not use any stronger language than that, but it would be really incorrect that we can go on air to say that a deputy president has no role in managing the affairs of Kenya. Both Jubilee 1 and Jubilee 2 are nusu mkate. And that's why, as Governor Nok was presenting, I said, look, talk to the question of composition of cabinet. Because he told us, yeah, these policies are implemented through cabinet. So let us look at the composition of cabinet and who brought them or who appointed them or who brought them to the table of appointment. They're appointed by the president, but who contributes them? And you are quite right. It was the nusu mkate government. There can be take Charles Ketel, for example. Not to single individuals, but take Charles Ketel, who was Minister of Energy. Okay, brought from the URP now UDA side. Just to give you one example. And it was actually 50-50. So, but you can then also go to the question of character. Question of character. Because if you are in an organization and you disagree with that the management of that organization, or you are sidelined the management of, one option available to you is to step away. Because obviously, if you're sitting here on a big salary and big perks of office and you're not doing any work, going on foreign trips that cost hundreds of millions of shillings of taxpayer money, and yet you're telling us you are not doing any work, that you've been sidelined, why can't you just resign then? Isn't it deceitful to be using public money in the manner that our colleagues are using, yet want to go on air repeatedly to say, by the way, I've been sidelined, there's no work I'm doing here. Isn't it deceitful to want to say, oh, we built that road over there and I was the chairman of something, or I did this. But then when you turn around and say, the very debt that financed that road, sikujua, I mean, which side of you do you want us to believe? Isn't it deceitful? Government runs on the basis of collective responsibility. And if you disagree with something in government, as I said, one option to you is to resign. Finally, on this question of the PFM, division of revenue, and the role of the deputy president. Whereas what Nanok is saying, that those discussions and debates have been fairly heated, the Council of Governors does not always win. The reality is that this financial year that we are implementing, We moved from 316 to 370 billion. So there was an increment. However, it's not the full increment we wanted. And I want to tell you, IBEC is not a rubber stamp. IBEC is a formal institution. Okay. For instance, take even raising counties going to the financial market to raise money, such as Laikipia has done with the 1 billion infrastructure bond. The final approval is actually at IBEC. So Treasury, for example, in the case of Laikipia, Treasury applies to IBEC to say, I have found one kijana who is qualified to raise monies in the financial market via a bond. You, IBEC, give me authority to proceed. And that's exactly what happened with the Laikipia bond. So IBEC is not an inconsequential organ. I mean, it is just that we are being this generous. You want to claim credit, but don't want to own to the mistakes or to the failures of the same administration that you've been serving. And I think nothing could be more deceitful to Kenyans.
Let me respond to my colleague and of course the questions that have been posed here, and I want to differ with him. First is, who is in government as we speak now? Who has influence in government as we speak now? We know very well, after 2017, the assignments that the deputy president was doing in government were assigned to a minister, cabinet secretary. And in terms of coordinating the ministries, in terms of even coordinating the World Bank funds for Northern Kenya that collapsed. To this date, we don't know who is implementing, because those funds were never implemented. And Raila Odinga has been on record saying he has been advising the Jubilee administration in the second term. And he has even promised that the current president is going to be his advisor once he becomes president. So you can't rule that one out. That he has been having a very big influence on this government. Second, why would parliamentary committees supposed to be shared by members of the ruling administration be shared by the opposition? Like finance committee, why will somebody from ODM be sharing the finance committee, which is a fully government responsibility? So you can really see the reasons why we are saying the opposition is in government and driving the government agenda. And that's why William Ruto has been put aside. And I can tell you, there is no particular assignment in the second term that has been delegated to him, which he has refused to implement. And of course, the BBI has been that big challenge, because what was the BBI introducing? The BBI was introducing changes in the constitution, changes in the governance structure, even bringing in issues that could be done administratively and saying, let's change the constitution to do it. What was the Youth Commission doing in the BBI? You don't need to create a youth commission by changing the constitution. You don't need to increase funds to counties by changing the constitution. You can do it administratively now. Then, second issue, is this a nusu mkate government or not? It is not a nusu mkate government. The only nusu mkate government they are aware is the one of NAC, where President Kibaki and Prime Minister Raila Odinga came together. And in fact, they signed a coalition agreement that was tabled, that was known, that it was actually a nusu mkate government. For this particular one, it is one government. There is no agreement that has been put out in public to say it was a nusu mkate. The appointing authority is one. The sacking authority is one. And that's how it's been. And the deputy has been supporting the president in implementing those decisions. Once he's asked, take up this responsibility. And of course, you will admit with me, a lot of infrastructure. He drove the process on the ground. He visited areas where infrastructure was being built at that particular time.
So he was part of government?
That time, the first time he did that. The first time he did that. He's more or less, he is a deputy president constitutionally. But you can realize that the responsibilities that used to be assigned to him have been taken away.
Governor
they are being implemented by other people. Let me just say one last thing.
Okay.
When it comes to issues of character, and I think Azimio has been pushing for the deputy president to step away so that they can take up that footing. Of course, he has not stepped away. He's still sitting there to be assigned the responsibilities. In fact, if you ask Raila and the president to assign him responsibilities today, he will do those responsibilities. He will do it. And second is the question on who do we trust? Who is causing much more impunity? The person who boycotts businesses. How can you trust the person who boycotts businesses, including media businesses? How do you trust that person to be the one driving the growth of those businesses? How do you trust that person to be the one driving the reversal of the constitutional gains by Kenyans? So who is most trustworthy? And I think when we look at that, we look at the heart on who is the critical individual who should occupy the presidency in the elections on 9th of August. And of course, finally, on IBEC. You know, let me tell you, the increase of resources from 315 billion to 370, I mean, to me, it is not just an increase. What basically happened is conditional grants that are not always counted in the division were added on to what is being allocated to counties. So it's basically we are discussing more or less almost around the same resources we are getting because there was a shareable revenue and then the conditional grants that were being added. What they have done now, they have put the conditional grants into the shareable revenue for Kenyans to think that counties now have been given more money. Yet that is not the reality.
Well, I better correct that because first of all, conditional grants are time specific, okay? And they are intended for you to use the time to achieve a policy objective. At the end of that time, you can decide to take away the conditional grant, or if you want to continue with it, you can put it in the common pool. So, whereas it is true, for example, the road maintenance fund is now no longer a conditional grant. It's part of the ordinary shareable revenue. But in the movement from 316 to 370, there was 40 billion new money that was not part of conditional grants that were expiring. Who do you trust? Because I think, as Governor Nanok has tried to summarize, it comes down to that. Who do you trust? Aspirant Raila Odinga spent 8.5 years in detention fighting for political pluralism. He was detained first. He didn't give up. He was detained again. He didn't give up. He was detained a third time. He was detained a fourth time. He didn't give up. And political pluralism finally came to us in 1992. As Raila Odinga and other opposition leaders, so maybe I'll trust that person because he was willing to put 8.5 years of his life for the fight for freedoms of Kenyans. In the 90s, when Nanok's aspirant were printing money, were running around as YK92 and so on, Raila Odinga and the rest of opposition leaders were pushing the envelope of political freedom in Kenya. In the turn from KANU to Kibaki or to the National Rainbow Coalition, again, it is Raila is center stage in moving the political direction or moving Kenya in the right political direction. Yeah. So character. When it is, and I just want to, let me put it out there. If you look at a number of our colleagues,
About the nusu mkate
I'm getting there, and whether opposition is in government, I'm trying to go quickly because I realize we're running out of time. If you look at our colleagues, including his aspirant, and I will not say they are guilty, what you will find is that many of our colleagues have court cases related to governance issues, whether you have grabbed land, public land, or some other public asset. And it is across 10, 20 leaders, key leaders in that formation. Compare that formation to ours. So again, going to the question of character, who can you trust that the things they're telling you? Ndu asked, and my colleague was unable to answer, these promises you made about Stadia, okay, why didn't you implement them? And you are saying in the first half of this administration, at least the deputy president was being assigned responsibilities. You promised laptops. Why didn't you implement them? You had said you're going to do it in 6 months. The first term was 5 years. Why didn't you implement these things? And how can we then trust that anything that you promise now?
I think those are questions for the president.
The president is not running. The president is not running. Is the opposition in government? No. Raila Odinga is the leader of opposition. He is not the leader within a government. But yes, the opposition has been supporting government. Frankly,
So the opposition is not in government; it is just supporting
it
government.
does support government.
Okay.
And in fact, Eric, I'm sure you've heard of the term loyal opposition. Being in opposition is not to mean that you must oppose every initiative of government. It is not to mean that. In fact, you are expected to be a government in waiting. You saw in Singapore the other day, government taking very stern action against leaders of opposition on governance issues. Because you, as opposition, are, yes, you check the government, but you are also a government in waiting. Therefore, you must behave in certain ways.
As if you're in government.
As if
Point made.
as I conclude,
Governor,
BBI, yep.
thank you. Let's
Thank you.
conclude on that point. Just to say,
Can I say
finally,
just one word?
final word,
Yeah.
and make it a 30-second word.
Yeah. Indeed, the nusu mkate government, the Kibaki government, and Kibaki was, mind you, is my friend's uncle.
Oh, thank
Had
you for
problems. Had problems.
Because
That
of-
Mkusu government had problems. The prime minister were literally fighting with President Kibaki.
we are getting back into that
And-
conversation.
and-
Governor Nanok, it's okay. We've heard it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies, for joining us today. Thank you
It
for
is my pleasure.
Vibrant conversation. Yep, they're shaking hands. Schoolmates, primary schoolmates, work together as assistant ministers. Governor Nanok has served as the chair of the Council of Governors, in which Governor Muriithi has been serving. We hope to have some peaceful conversations going forward, and even peaceful campaigns. And thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for
But
tuning in
perhaps
to
you could
Kenya's
have-
biggest conversation.
You could have allowed us to both say to Kenyans,
Eh.
let us have actually peaceful campaigns on both sides.
That's good.
Let me, I can go first.
No, we're done.
Oh,
because the
okay.
time
Bye.
is over. Asanteni sana. Asanteni
done,
sana. Yes, we're done. Asanteni sana. Thank you for tuning in to Kenya's biggest
you, guys.
conversation. Join us again tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. to 10 a.m.